I have again with me my dear friend Imran Harifuddin, and we're going to have another chat on Imran's path towards making the Qur'an the center of his understanding. I want to address some of the fears I think that many people have. Like, I can just imagine somebody watching you speaking last week and saying to himself, somebody that's new to the concept, and saying to himself, if every man is going to understand the Qur'an in his own way, then how many ideas, how many madhabs are we not going to end up with? And what do we teach our children? Because every guy has got his own ideas. Imran, I know you're a man, you have young children, you have a family, I have a family. We are here in a very, very serious business, and that is, what is it that we hand down to our children? I want to ask you, how do you address that fear by saying that when you are going to go for the Qur'an as the center of Islam, you're going to have so many wild ideas running around? How do you respond to somebody who says that to you?
So this path is not the easy path, it's the more difficult one. The easy path is to just go along with what everyone else is going along with, right? And I think many Muslim people end up just following, partly because it's they don't know about any alternative, and partly because if they do try an alternative, they'll be ostracized. And that's a big problem, especially if you're living in a fairly tight-knit community. Being ostracized is one of the worst things that can happen to you. So it's not an easy path. But one idea that has been thrown at me quite a bit is, how can the majority be wrong, right? But the Quran actually speaks about this. Chapter 6 verse 116, Allah talks about the majority. And those who follow the majority on earth, they will be led astray. They only follow but conjecture. And from everything I've read about hadith is essentially just conjecture in a lot of ways, hearsay and conjecture. So that argument about following the majority is not necessarily correct. I mean, when the Prophet first received the Qur'an, he was in the minority, and the people who followed him, they were all in the minority. So Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, and I think people are latching on to some of those very core ideas from the Qur'an, and that's convincing them to embrace Islam. But that doesn't mean that the majority are correct. And when I think about what do I pass down, what exactly do I teach my children? They are growing up in a society where the Sunni Islam is the majority. So there's certain things, like if a child's name is Ibrahim or Muhammad, people expect that they know certain things, and that they behave in a certain way, and that they do things in a certain way. So the approach that I've taken is to teach my children the Sunni way, but to tell them that, look, I'm only teaching you this because this is what is expected of you in the society. But this is what I actually believe, and I can show them proof of everything that I tell them. And I'm trying to follow that Quranic principle of bring your evidence if you are truthful, bring your proof if you are truthful. And one thing that struck me quite a bit when I was growing up is there was always this fear, or the sense of fear, that people are going to leave Islam. So if you had a non-Muslim friend, for example, it was almost like you shouldn't really be too friendly with that person. And the sense I got was almost like, is that person going to somehow convert you or change you? But the way I see it now is, if you know that what you're following is the truth, and you have full confidence that what you're following is the truth, then not only should you not be afraid of outside influences, you should actually invite those outside influences to challenge your position. And that's what I think, or that is essentially my approach with my children. So I will teach them what I know to the best of my ability, but I encourage them to go out and go and learn other things. If they want to learn about Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, go for it. I'm not going to stop them. And if they find something that is better than what I've taught them, then I will follow that thing. Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to be married to some specific orthodoxy. What I'm looking for is the truth. And so far, the truth that I found is in the Qur'an. And I have invited challenges to that position. And so far, no one has succeeded in dethroning the Qur'an as the source of truth for me.
Which brings me, Imran, to a verse from the Qur'an where Allah uses the word urwatul wuthqa. And I've got the verse here. Let me put the verse on where Allah says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. La ikraha fi din, qad tabayyana ar-rushd min al-ghayy, faman yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah faqad istamsaka bil-urwatil wuthqa. There should be no imposition of pattern of belief. Right is clearly distinguishable from wrong. Whoever abandons the corrupt way and embraces God, i.e. the Qur'an, grabs hold of a firm, unbreakable grip. Now, if I must take what you're saying there, I also have young adults, one of them, and at university. And if I must reflect on the challenges that they face there, then I doubt that the hadith is an urwatul wuthqa. It is not a firm handshake because its ontology is questionable. So I'm saying to you, the urwatul wuthqa is what we're offering. It is the firm grip. It is the unbreakable grip with truth. Whereas hadith gives the urwatul khafif.
Quran, Allah refers to lahwal hadith.
Yes.
Just idle tales, just like nonsense.
Yes. Nonsensical. So let's just quickly proceed down that line of thinking, and then let me ask you the question: does placing the Quran at the center make us prone to more division? Some people tell me, look, I had one subscriber writing to me in a state of panic one day. I could see it was a very long WhatsApp message, almost like throwing her arms up in despair and saying, I don't know what to follow anymore. One guy says this, the other guy says this, and what the heck am I supposed to do? Are we not opening up the way for like 1,000 people having 1,000 different views? Is that really in practice what is happening with the Quran-centric community?
So when, at least in my reading of the Quran, there's a lot of repetition. Allah repeats things many times, repeats concepts many times. And I think that the more something is repeated in the Quran, the more important it is, or the more of a core tenet of the message it is. So, for example, accountability. We are accountable for everything that we do on this earth during this life, and we will be answerable for those things in the year after. That's one of the core tenets of the Quran. And I have not met anybody or even heard of anybody who disagrees with that idea. Another core tenet of the Quran is to, in general, just be a good person. Look after your family, see to the wayfarer, be kind, be just. I have not met anybody who differs with that kind of idea. So I think those core tenets, the core parts of what it means to be a Muslim and what it means to follow what's in the Quran, I have not really met or come across anybody who disagrees with those ideas. So instead of focusing on the small things that might be different, I think it's more important to focus on what are those core ideas, because And I see this even when it comes to like other religions, like let's take Christianity for example. There's a lot of similarity between the way we do things, Muslims want to do things, and the way Christians want to do things. There's a lot of core values that are shared. Yes, there's some key differences, but the focus when you have a Muslim and a Christian, the focus tends to be on those differences rather than on the similarities. And I think that's where the despair might start, because once you start looking at the differences, there might be a large number of differences, but the impact is relatively small. So, for example, there are some who read the Qur'an and they might come to this idea, this conclusion that the earth is flat. Now that's a very fringe, small group of people who seem to believe that. But we know from evidence and different experiments and things like that the earth is round. And even in the Qur'an itself, we can see that there's evidence for the earth being round. But does that change whether I believe the earth is round or flat? Does that change my day to day? Does it change how I interact with my children, how I interact with my wife, how I interact with my co-workers, whether I give charity or not? It doesn't change any of those things.
You know, as Muslims, we grow up believing that we possess the ultimate purity test for humanity. It's a false belief. It's an absolutely false belief, because many of those the purity checklist, the 10,000 point checklist, whether you said Allahumma inni when you went to the toilet, whether you used your right hand, whether you stepped in the mosque with your right foot, that checklist is the most false thing ever. And the Muslims can't live without it. They almost feel, if I don't do the 10,000 checklist, I'm going to burn in hell. I'm not a good Muslim. I'm a bad person. And that is the most serious psychological damage that the madrasas visit on the youngsters, is that purity checklist. You know what? I believe in a checklist, but my checklist is not based on books of people that lived 10,000 years ago. We believe in best practice. There's nothing wrong with best practice. But I believe best practice has to be grounded in what is provable, what is defensible. If you are going to say that you eat with your right hand because there's a reason, and it's a convention, and you're going to use your left hand for anything that is maybe impure, that makes sense, and I'm gladly go along with that. But if you're simply going to tell me that Abu Huraira said you must do this and that, and then he also said you must kill black dogs. So I think the purity checklist being grounded in hadith, I think people carry that around, man. And then when they look at Qur'an, being a person who puts Qur'an at the center, then they feel lost, because where's my checklist? Where's my checklist? I need my checklist. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Meanwhile, you've created an opportunity for you now to foster some sort of fraternity with your Christian brother, because now instead of being such an alien creature in the workplace, where you are dressing in a different way, where you are speaking in a different way, you are spicing your language with Arabic words, maybe you could become more like you can sound and look a bit more like the rest of the people. Maybe they'll give you a hearing when you speak to them about the Day of Judgment, when you speak to them about the existence of Allah, when you speak to them about the haram, the status of riba, when you speak to them about the importance of the abhorrence of zina, the abhorrence of casual sex. Maybe they will listen to the real checklist if you stop trying to worship the false checklist. This is a free-thinking world. We need to do the research and allow the best position to predominate. Allah says, "Alladhina yastami'una al-qawl," those who listen attentively to all the viewpoints, fattabi'una ahsana, and then adopt the one that makes most sense, that is most rational, that is best, the best viewpoint. That is what we are arguing, from a Quran-centric position. I mean, if I can ask you this, Imran, how did you overcome that need to be attached to this checklist?
If I'm being completely honest, I have not completely overcome it. I mean, when I go to the mosque, I still feel this need to walk in with my right foot, even though I know there's nothing divine about it. But it's been so ingrained in me that it's difficult to shake. And if people want to continue doing those things, but it is a difficult thing to shake. But I don't think it's necessary to specifically try to shake it.
I think I agree with you there. The Quran gives hudud. It doesn't say all that grey area there, you can't do that. It doesn't say you can't eat with you can't go and make salah in the mosque, Trawi, if you want to make Tarawih salah in Ramadan. That's the beauty. Do it if you feel you want to fit in, because this dear subscriber was telling me, look, that is where I used to socialize, that is where my friends are, and now I'm feeling cut off from everyone. I said to her, Bismillah, go. But as long as you don't follow them in their belief that whoever doesn't do it must be killed, because there is a belief that if you don't make salah, then you must be killed. You must be given 3 warnings, and then they must come and chop your head off. Now, that is nowhere in the Quran. As long as you don't harbor those false assertions, as long as you do not attribute to Allah something which you have no knowledge of, which there is no basis for, in other words, you are nice, you are on safe grounds. I mean, go there, go to Trawi, make Trawi all night. I mean, do what, knock yourself out. And I think that is what you're saying, isn't it? Is that we're not saying to people, don't continue living your life as you are. If you're wearing a certain scarf a certain way, it's the tradition in your community. Why are you putting yourself under pressure that you have to stop doing it that way? Isn't that what we're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, the mention of Tarawih, for example, 20 rak'ah, and then on top of that, people still do the Salat al-Layl, even more, late into the night, and knock yourself out is the correct term. And I think people have the sense of it has to be difficult. It has to be something that it's not easy, and it is difficult.
Yeah.
And I think that when you have this massive checklist, this purity checklist, and you are trying to do every single thing on that checklist, and you can feel how difficult it is, and now you look at this other guy who doesn't seem to care, suddenly it creates the sense of being very judgmental of that person. And I say this from experience, because I used to be that person who would feel judgmental towards other people. And what I found is that even among the people who are not as invested, who were not as invested in the Orthodox Islam, if I spoke to them and I told them, like, that thing that you did there, like, you shouldn't do that, or you needed to do it this way, they would feel guilty. Instead of calling me out and telling me, why am I being judgmental? And that's the hold that this purity checklist tends to have over people.
I'm just reminded that purity checklist. I was making a khutbah one day in a place somewhere in Cape Town, and when I was done, I came down from the mimbar, and one of the guys in front, he came to me and he said, Sheikh, you know what? You made a slight mistake. You should sit between the 2 khutbahs. You shouldn't just keep on standing. And that's just one of those 10,000 items on his checklist. That is at the point where you become a nuisance if you impose your ideas. But that is also what the madrasa does to us. That is the point where you become a public nuisance, when you want to tell other people. I go on TikTok. I do post some TikToks also around Gaza and some more political TikToks. And I cringe every time a brilliant voice comes up, a voice in favor of the oppressed of Gaza. A woman with excellent articulation. that God has blessed with a beautiful face also, but she doesn't have a scarf on, but she does an amazing job, then I can already expect in the comments they're going to say, sister, but where is your scarf, sister? They don't look at this woman's contribution where she's informed 100,000 people, more than you, stupid person, can ever reach. She's reached 100 or 200,000 people. She's educated people about justice and injustice. And all you have to say is, sister, where is the scarf? I would be so happy if you can wear a scarf, please. That is the type of nuisance that I think people are brainwashed into.
Well, the problem is people think that they're doing you a favor when they tell you you should sit between the two khutbahs, or that you should wear a scarf. They think they're doing you a favor. They're trying to save you, essentially. But they don't realize that it does become a nuisance.
Yeah.
And
they do it very innocently, almost, actually.
Yeah, they think they're doing it valiantly.
Yeah.
They think they're doing God's work.
But at the same time, those very people, right? One Friday, I saw a guy coming to mosque in such a hurry. He was almost bumping the people at the bus stop off the pavement. Like he swung his car onto the pavement, and there were like a bunch of, let me say it, non-Muslim Christian children standing at the bus stop. And him pulling up there with his long beard and his kurta, almost running into these kids standing on the bus stop, on the pavement by the bus stop. And for him, it was important that he gets to the mosque early. For him, the fact that you have to respect people standing on the pavement isn't on his checklist. That is my problem, is the real things are not on their checklist. They put a lot of stuff on their checklist, but some of the good things are not on their checklist. Respect.
Now therein lies, I think that's the core issue here, that there's a whole long checklist of minutiae, but people are doing that in place of those core tenets that are in the Qur'an.
Yeah.
So one example would be lending someone money. And I think it's in chapter 2 verse 280, somewhere around there, where Allah says, like, lend someone money, and if you are by your right to get that money back at the agreed upon time and all of those things. But if you see that the person is in difficulty, let them, give them respite, make it a bit easier for them, and say, okay, don't worry, I'll give you another week or another month or whatever it is. And Allah then goes further and says, it would actually be better if you can to write that debt off. But Allah doesn't say it's better for the debtor, for the person who owes you the money. Allah says it's better for you as the person who loaned the money, because, and the way I understand that is because it's a good thing to do. You're helping this person out, but it's increasing your spiritual growth by doing that.
How many people do that? The Muslims are very unforgiving of the debt. They rather put 5 lawyers on you to demand payment or something like that. And yet that's a guy that goes for Hajj every year. He pulls out 100,000 a year to go overseas.
That's probably why he can afford it.
But he's unwilling to forgive the debt, or he underpays his workers. Their checklist is not even, because the Quran speaks about the wayfarer, the masakin, the orphan. How many Muslims have a direct program in their lives? I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience. I don't have it. Where we actually regularly donate to the orphans. And yet the Quran mentions the orphans how many times?
Yeah.
Kindness to the orphans. So, Imran, I think let's wrap it up here. Your thoughts, your final thoughts on putting the Quran at the center, and how do we forge a kind of a new unity, the unity that the Quran refers to when the Quran says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ. How do we forge that unity in terms of the Quran?
Yeah, I think it starts with everyone actually picking up the book and reading it and trying to understand it for themselves. And yes, there's going to be many verses that are maybe not easy to understand, but those are typically not the verses that are part of those core tenets of what it is to be a Muslim. And I'm confident that anybody who reads the Qur'an will get the main message, which is that message of accountability and being a good person.
Yeah.
So don't despair and start from zero. Put your mind at zero and try and learn what those core tenets are. I mean, we mentioned some of them today, but it's not a difficult thing to learn those. Once one gets into the minutia, yes, there's room for debate and things like that, but don't focus on that at the start. Focus on those core things, and you only really need to know those core things to be a good person.
And of course, all the main madhabs that are at war, that have been at war in the past, have had their roots in hadith, not in Qur'an.
Yes,
So that's something to note also. So, unity really will come from us rededicating ourselves to the Qur'an primarily. And let's do it again next time. Shukran to you. Assalamu alaikum.